Morena, everybody, and welcome to Council meeting of Monday, 26th of February, 2024. Nice to see our public benches, seats filled with people. Welcome along to the meeting. Just a reminder from health and safety, if the alarm sounds, we make our way out the nearest exit, which is probably the door at the back, and that we assemble across the road from the building and wait instructions from staff. Everyone needs to be aware that this is being live streamed, and I think they do pick up comments from the audience, so just be careful. And the video will be publicly available on YouTube, and a reminder to please either turn your mobile phones off or put them onto silent for us. Thank you. Shad, can I ask you to open with a karakia, please?
Morena tātou, kia koe rā Anne, I whakahaere nei tēnei o tō tātou nei hui, nō reira tēnā koe. Huri ake rā, kia koutou kua tai nei ki tēnei huihuinga I te ata nei, kia koutou rā ngai tiahi, nau mahara mai, ki roto ki tēnei o tō tātou nei whare. Me ki rā ngā āpiha, ngā kaimahi o te kaunihira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. E tīmatau ki tātou, nō reira kia nei tātou. E te atua anei rā mātou I huitahi nei tēnei ata. E te atua ka tuku rā ngā whakamuimiti ngā whakawhetai ki a koe, nō reira toro mai rā tōringa kaha ki runga I a mātou, hei āwhina nei, hei tohu nei a mātou roto I nei mahi. Ko te tūmanako, kia whaihua rā hi tika mā tātou katoa. Nō reira te atua tēnei mātou ina tēnei kia koe. Ori ki tōnga tapu. Āmeni.
Thank you, Shad. We have no apologies, so we'll move to the public forum. And first up, we have Kāinga Ora coming. We've got Mark Fraser, who's the General Manager of Urban Development and Delivery. We've got Darren Toy and Campbell Larking. Is that right? Yes, I can see Darren there. Welcome. So just make sure that the green button is on, Darren. You know the score. And we're in your hands.
Okay. Good morning. Straight into it. So thank you for having us here. I'm Mark Fraser, as you introduced, and I'm the General Manager of Urban Development at Kāinga Ora. I'm joined here by Darren Toy, who'll be familiar to many of you. We don't have too much to say, but if I just do a quick introduction in terms of how we fit into things, and I've got a couple of remarks in why we're here this morning. So I'm part of the leadership team for Kāinga Ora, and the business that I'm responsible for is the land development business within Kāinga Ora. So we've got a portfolio of about 50,000 homes, or land that will produce about 50,000 homes on the go at the moment across the country. And it's a mix of both the redevelopment of large tracts of land that are currently owned by the Crown and have older state housing on them. And we have some very big projects where we're renewing that land and that housing. But we also have a mix of greenfields projects where it is a more traditional, start from scratch, suburban or urban development, much like the one that we're here to talk to today. So that's how I fit in for Kāinga Ora. As you know, Kāinga Ora was formed in 2019, and what it was set up to do was, of course, continue to be the landlord for what is now about 70,000 state homes. And part of that job is to produce more of those. But the other thing that was done in the setup of Kāinga Ora was to, as a Crown agency, give it responsibility for driving housing and urban outcomes where it made sense to do so. And so that increased mandate is what we've been stepping into in the last few years. So we have been working really closely with Tauranga for some years now, and certainly, in earnest, I guess, since KO was actually formed. And the Smart Growth Partnership that's been operating here for a while, Darren in particular, Cam, who's chosen to stay seated, and a few others. Like we've been very, very involved and consider ourselves a partner in that work. A couple of years ago, the smart growth work and the council identified that to get some things rolling, one of the strategic moves that would help to unlock land for housing, which the city so desperately needs, was Ferncliff Farm. Kāinga Order purchased that using what is called the Kāinga Order Land Program. We purchased that a couple of years ago, and we're looking to develop it alongside the other two landowners, Classic and IMF, sorry. And it's seen as a way, well, it will be a way to unlock development, housing activity. Kāinga Order will also, in that role, we will make sure that we partner with and bring other agencies to the table to make the most from the opportunity of that type of development. Where you master plan it and you do it well, for example, the Ministry of Education, where we look to bring in them to make new schooling part of it. And we're here today to say we want to support this notification for this plan change. It's an important step in getting this growth moving. It allows us to really begin our work in earnest to begin to unlock it. And I think one of the things that's also important is the approach that Kāinga Order will take in housing, apart from just being the catalyst perhaps to unlock this parcels, is that we will lead to move the market perhaps beyond, a conservative base. So we'll be delivering standalone homes, yes, of course, but we will drive to produce more that's in a duplex and terrace topology and see if we can't move how the city is prepared to approach development and maybe even density. So that was really all I wanted to say and not take up too much time, but happy to take some questions, and if they're too complicated, I'll ask Darren.
Thanks, Mark. Darren, did you want to make any comments? Nothing to add? First of all, Mark, can I say that we're delighted that you have, and we've worked closely with Darren through the time to have you as a partner. We always felt it was very helpful to have a Crown agency as a partner in developing this important piece of land for Tauranga, and also for, as you say, the drive to change what is delivered to the market. So yes, a mixture of standalone, but also increasing that density as we strive to go up rather than continuing to go out. So thank you very much, and we've really appreciated the commissioners working with Darren over the time that we've been here, which is rapidly coming to a close. Any questions? Stephen?
Just a quick one. Since you introduced the topic of increased density, do you have a view at this stage as to what sort of numbers that might look like? At the moment, the variation talks of a minimum density of 25. So obviously that enables greater density. So I'd be interested to have an insight on that.
Our process, we're keen to support the plan change. So where the plan change is heading is right, is our view in terms of the density it's providing. We're not imagining we're going to show up in Tauranga and do something that everyone's, we're not building apartments out there. So really my density reference is to, and the type of work that all our projects are, we're always going to try and be just beyond what the market might conservatively deliver. But that is not to say that we're out there scaring everybody. So where the plan change is heading, yeah, we support that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. All the best.
Bryce Don from Element IMF. Welcome, Bryce.
Good morning, commissioners, staff and other stakeholders. I haven't got too much to say. I just want to say that we're obviously in support of notification. We look forward to continuing to work with your staff and with the other stakeholders to get this project rolling. It's been quite a long time and it's not an easy project. But yeah, there's a lot of effort that has gone into it. Probably also just briefly say, express our gratitude to Kaingora. It probably goes unnoticed, but they've brought a lot of financial impetus to this project, and it's a lot closer now than it would have been without them being part of it. Yeah, that's all from me.
Bryce, any questions for Bryce? No. We do have quite a number of questions for the staff as to how we can A, hurry things up, and B, help the development by increasing the number of houses that you're able to bring to market.
Thank you. I'll leave you to do that then.
Yes, okay. Thanks very much, Bryce. So that's all in the public forum today. So we move on through the agenda. No late items. No, I haven't been notified of any late items. There's no confidential business to be transferred into the open. There is a change to the order of business. So after 11.3, rather than go on to talk about the project update on the Civic Whare exhibition and museum at 11.4, we are going to go into public excluded and complete the public excluded, and then we will come back into open to complete the open agenda with that project update on those buildings, that building project. Do I need a motion for that? Yep. Shad's moving and Bill's seconding. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 12th of December. Any comments, any changes? If not, would someone like to move? It's a true and correct record. Bill and Stephen seconded. Nothing in there. Excellent minutes as normal, Janie. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Conflicts of interest. Shad.
Sorry, just wanted to clear if there are conversations about government's fast track consenting process throughout today. I'm supporting some of that work by the Crown, so I just want to note that.
Note that, and it would probably be best if we do have any motion that relates to that, but you step back. Take no part. Okay, no deputations, presentations or petitions, no recommendations from other committees. That brings us to the business for today. And the first item is the variation to Plan Change 33, Tauranga West Urban Growth. And I think we've got Alistair and Andy coming up. Morena. None of you look like Christine Jones or Richard Harkness, but there's Richard. Flattery gets you everywhere.
Good morning. We have a presentation and we're just working through the IT stuff to get that up. A few updates had to be run, which were making things a bit tricky, but we'll get there. I just have some very short preliminary comments to make. And so just welcoming the rest of the team today. So Alistair Talbot, Richard Harkness, there's of course another army of people who have been working on this project behind the scenes, and we can't all be here today. But we are very pleased to bring this report to you today. A lot of work has gone into it, and we've just ticked into year 8 working on the Tauranga West project, so probably gives you some idea. I just want to acknowledge, I guess it's not just a Tauranga City Council project, it is a partnership project. We have two of our key partners here today who have spoken to you this morning. So I just want to acknowledge that. And we will, we're ready to go. So we will just jump into the slides. Alistair will run you through the slides, and then I understand you're going to grill us with some questions. So we'll look forward to that.
Morena, well, thank you, Anahira, for getting the slides. My computer decided to do an update to Zoom just as I went to join the meeting. So purpose of our report today is to request approval for public notification of Variation 1. Variation 1 seeks to rezone the Tauranga West urban growth area from rural to medium density residential zone. Call up the first slide if we can. Yeah, thanks, Anahira. I think Tauranga West is well known to you all. It's obviously got a strong footing in the smart growth strategy, the urban form and transport initiative, and also the statutorily important regional policy statement as a future growth area and a short-term delivered growth area. And in providing for that growth, it helps the council to step closer towards its requirements in delivering urban land supply or land supply for urban development. The approach to rezoning. So in November 2022, council agreed that the rezoning would take place via a variation to proposed plan change 33. And the benefits of that approach at the time were identified as the defined timeline that a variation to the proposed plan change 33 would deliver. There were also procedural advantages identified, and in applying the MDRS standards, the medium density residential standards, that would then bring this growth area into consistency with the rest of the city and its residential zones. The approach to rezoning also provides for further public feedback through a formal submission process, and that's in addition to the engagement that's been undertaken over the past, well, now going 8 years on the planning for this area and the wider Western Corridor. Key steps, I'll touch on these on the last slide as well, just particularly in terms of timeframes. But on the basis that it's agreed today that this is acceptable for public notification, then we step into a submission process initially that's defined statutorily in terms of timeframes of 20 working days. We then summarise the submissions, call for further submissions and support or opposition. At that point, we know the complexity and nature of those submissions from people and key partners. Dependent on the nature and complexity of those submissions, that really influences when we can step forward to a hearing. If there are submissions which are challenging some of the technical aspects of what we've already looked at, then we are required to do more technical investigation, which may be directed by an independent panel or even sort of expert caucusing. Then that can add to the timeframe in which we can schedule a hearing. But we are looking at a hearing late this year or early next, and that then helps us meet the timeframe for council notifying a decision, which is by the end of 2025. The variation itself and the key provisions, as mentioned, variation looks to introduce the medium density residential zone and standards across the majority of the growth area. That brings it in line and consistent with the rest of the residential zones across the city, which are being considered through proposed plan change 33, enabling housing supply. There are a few properties at the southern end of the growth area, that's that light brown colour, which would remain rural, and that reflects existing land use and some of the characteristics of that land. It's quite low lying and not so suitable for further development. Other key zone changes would be extension of the conservation zone and establishment of passive open space zone. That's the light green and sorry, I can't see the colour, but next to the the light green on the left of the urban growth plan, the lighter green, I'm told. That's to reflect feedback around cultural heritage and also Wairau River landscape values. Key other provisions relate to the natural hazards affecting the land. So there's minimum building platforms to help manage flood risk. There's the density provision, which has also been identified in questions to Kāinga Ora, seeking a minimum average net yield of 25 dwellings per hectare. That's influenced, or its achievability is influenced by topographical, geotechnical, and some landscape interests. Its provision or enabling provisions in the plan change to establish a local commercial centre and 2 neighbourhood centres. So they're the types of facilities that provide the local dairy or restaurant or bar or similar. The commercial centre could provide for a local supermarket in the growth area. And then the remaining key provisions relate to staging. So they're quite important to this variation. There's the spine road, which is required at this stage to be connected once 2,400 houses are provided. And then there are some broader staging provisions relating to transport, water and wastewater. And I'll go into those to more detail on the following slide. So the establishment of the growth area is dependent on particularly transport investment and the enabling works improvements, which Council and NZTA have been working on over a number of years. Those enabling works provisions provide access into the growth area at the Tauranga village area and down at the southern roundabout or Redwood Lane intersection. Initially, those enabling works allow or enable up to 2,400 homes. That threshold has been determined through technical assessment by the supplier who's considered this wider network benefits, working together with NZTA and other key stakeholders. That 2,400 homes doesn't account for or limit education, health, retail, and social and community purpose activities. Those activities are seen as almost internalising or minimising trips, so they're sort of excluded from the 2,400 home limit. When we look at historic housing delivery across the city and similar sort of growth areas, around 200 homes per year is anticipated to be delivered once this area is rezoned, which would give us 10 to 12 years of development capacity, or through to about 2039. NZTA at the moment is still considering the timing for delivery of the broader solution, which is required to enable full build out of this area and wider growth across the broader Western corridor. We're awaiting the release of the government's new government policy statement on land transport. We understand that's due in March, and we'll be looking closely at that, particularly in terms of whether some of those pre-election statements around delivery of the Tauranga network connections improvement is a one-stage project or continues to be a multi-stage project out into the 2040s. Assuming that project is delivered as a one-stage project or even staged as it's currently proposed, which would be by 2031, then we can anticipate a more straightforward resource consent process, which would be discretionary, so it could be approved or could be refused, to go beyond the 2,400 houses. So there is that issue that at the moment, the developers, the council are taking on investment and risk, and I guess releasing the full development potential is subject to broader government investment. So that's, again, why we'll keep a close eye on the government policy statement release and then what follows from that, NZTA's delivery of the National Land Transport Program. Sorry, final slide. Thanks, Anahira. So next steps, on the basis that we are able to publicly notify the variation, then we'd step into a submission and further submission process. We would hold a public open day on the 25th of March, invite community along to understand the provisions in more detail. They've got that opportunity to also submit in support or opposition or raise issues they might want further clarity on. We'd then look to review those submissions received, and at that point I think we can look again at the program and see whether a hearing later this year or early next is achievable. Once we get through the hearing, an independent hearings panel provides a recommendation to council. If council's accepting of all of those recommendations, then the decision is made. Should council not agree with some of those recommendations, then the final decision is referred to the Minister for the Environment. There are a number of other processes which continue to progress in parallel with this variation. Mentioned the NZTA's development of the next National Land Transport Program. It's dependent on the government policy statement being released. The key landowners are progressing earthworks consents. Kāinga have theirs lodged already and are working through that process. And the other main landowners are still developing their schemes, but we understand they'll come forward to be considered sort of at a same or similar time frame to this variation. And of course, the final consent which council needs to acquire is the comprehensive stormwater consent, and we're looking to lodge that, so that progresses in parallel with the variations that's lodged with regional council, and that work's progressing well too.
Assuming all of that goes well, when would the first house be available for sale, do you think?
At this stage, it's very dependent on the delivery of the enabling works. And I know that work is still being negotiated, but I think you'd be looking at probably late 2025, early 2026. And it might be that the southern end is available for housing delivery ahead of the northern end.
So the decision by council is the 31st of December 2025. Are you saying immediately after that houses could be available for sale?
Oh, sorry, not for sale. I guess it's dependent on whether one of the main developers wants to seek consents ahead of having the zoning in place. There is that pathway available, and I suppose as we step through the submission process and understand the nature of those submissions, some of those landowners may want to start that process so housing could be delivered earlier.
Could be talking 2026, 27?
About 27 probably is our current thinking, Anne.
Okay, so the two issues that are driving us nuts, to put it mildly. First of all, as you say, this is 8 years' work getting to here, and we're here at the beginning of 2024, and we're looking at another 2, 3, 4 years before actual houses can be delivered when we've got an acute housing shortage. So the first question is there any way to speed this up? And the government's talking about fast tracking because of this interminable process that we've got in front of us. So that's the first issue. And then the second issue that's also driving us crazy is the fact that this piece of land could deliver 4,000 houses, but because of the transport issues and the perceived congestion, I guess, that the technical analysis shows, we can only deliver, or the developers can only deliver 2,400. And we have to acknowledge that we've got that up from 2,000 over the last 12 months. The reality is the people are still coming, so they're still driving, they're still using the roads, but the technical work shows that we can't allow them to have houses there because the roads might be too congested. So how can we resolve that, given that the GPS is changing, Is there a way that we can, and we have a business case adopted by by NZTA for State Highway 29. Yep, it's still in 4 stages, but we're trying to get that as a single stage. Is there any way in this process that we can tag the remaining 1,600 houses to the commitment to construction for that? So you've laid out the normal process. I guess what we're saying is, can we speed it up, given that there is a process of fast track being developed and may well be available for fast track consenting? Would that alter the process here, or is it unavailable to us because of the variation that we're following to Plan Change 33? And then is there some way that we can get those 1,600 houses being able to be brought into the picture earlier rather than later? Does that sort of sum up where we are?
Initial crack at that. So in terms of the first issue, in terms of getting houses there sooner, the real issue is that there's no infrastructure there at the moment. So the infrastructure needs to be constructed through the enabling works to connect into the reticulated water networks and to deliver the roading and access. So it really depends primarily on how long it's going to take to deliver that infrastructure, and that's going through a process of procurement at the moment, and hopefully that'll be in construction very, very soon. So we need to understand, I guess, the timeframes for construction and completion, and we all know those can be they can move around a bit as you actually get into construction. If it's going to rain, or if the congestion's worse than you thought and you have to manage traffic differently. But fundamentally, that is the big challenge. And at the moment, I guess when you look at the timeframes that we understand, it's going to take a good couple of years to get the infrastructure in place, and particularly to get the infrastructure in place in the north, where Kaingaora and Classics own some of the easier land that can be developed. Whereas at the south, the land requires a lot of earthworks, a lot of preloading. It requires sort of the dirt to sit there for a couple of years to settle before houses can be built on it. But the fast track consenting regime that the government's looking to introduce potentially provides that sort of pathway where developers and potentially even council, with our comprehensive stormwater consent, could do consenting for at least part of the development or some of the consenting needs kind of alongside the plan change, rather than having to wait for the plan change to be completed. So there may well be opportunities, and we'll need to investigate what those are, make sure we're submitting on those probably in March when that process is happening, and hopefully getting some legislation in place that's going to be workable and help us move things along in Te Reka West. On the second issue around the additional 1,600 homes, I guess that's probably going to be like a live issue through the plan change. We know there are concerns about the performance of that network at the moment. So with more houses comes more cars. So there's probably people who might be pushing the other way. There's also going to be, I'm sure the landowners are very interested in being able to deliver all 4,000 homes. So I'm sure we're going to deal with a range of submissions there, and hopefully in an environment where the government has, provided greater commitment to the delivery of the long-term transport upgrades through a more favourable government policy statement, through a national land transport program that has money allocated for, the designation and construction phases, and that could well provide us the opportunity to revisit or amend our staging provisions to lock in all the 4,000 homes. But we don't have any of that in front of us right today. So a lot of that's going to be playing out and emerging over the next sort of 3 to 6 months.
I could just add to that a little bit more. There's a sense of, okay, what can the council do? There's a number of players in this game. So council can also look at the stormwater consenting. There's a comprehensive stormwater consent required for all the future urban runoff. So we can move forward on that in parallel with the notification, and the team that's working on that is doing so. Another aspect is the actual earthworks. It's not a TCC driven aspect. It's the responsibility of the landowners. But as you'd be aware, we've worked through with MFE on the NPS for freshwater management and created an exemption for the earthworks to proceed, despite this land still be saying currently zoned rural. they are able to progress that. And obviously Kaingora has taken up that opportunity, and the other developers are well aware of that. So that is a key one to reaching housing as soon as possible, as much as the infrastructure, because the earthworks will precede the actual internal reticulation being constructed and established. So that's not something that, say, TCC can control, but we're well aware that through those earthworks consenting with the regional council, there will be a number of hurdles to overcome under the NPS for freshwater management. There's a number of gateway tests that they'll have to meet regarding watercourses and wetlands. So that's still a whole phase ahead, and a critical one to preceding the actual housing. You mentioned the consenting, and Alistair did refer to that. While the land is zoned rural, yes, you can look to subdivide, but it's not as straightforward while the land's not actually zoned, apart from saying, as this variation to Plan Change 33 moves through the process, under the RMA, there's always been that sense of confidence and weight being given to the proposed plan change as it moves through that process and over time. So that's another avenue.
So I note that, so is the council able to make submissions itself into the plan change at the time of submissions? So we could actually make submissions along those lines?
That's correct. Once we understand where the government policy is heading, and certainly where NZTA decision is heading on the National Land Transport Program, we can make submissions. I guess we'll just need to be wary of the timeframes for each. We're looking to notify, I think, that first week of March, so the timing will be tight in terms of overlap.
Yeah, but if we go ahead and note, I'm not suggesting, I don't think any of us are suggesting we hold up the notification, but during the submission, I mean, we may well see in the GPS that whether we've been successful at getting State Highway 29 as one stage, and I guess the thinking is can we tie that in to the release of those other 1,600 as a trigger point, if you like, that once construction on that starts, because the other 1,600 wouldn't come to market until the second part, by which time the construction of 29 would be almost complete, if you like, rather than have to go back for another resource consent, that it just becomes part of the one process with the trigger. Right, the answer is yes, yeah.
What we can do is we can certainly keep the issue alive through a general submission point if we don't have the detail at that time, because, you know, hearings are not till the end of the year at best, and we should have a lot more certainty by then. So certainly we can keep that issue on the table, and we can take that direction from here.
Let's give certainty to the developers then that that's committed, that they've got this bit and then they'll get that bit.
So normally, a council would do a submission to its own plan change. Generally, you might find some minor issues or other matters. So then we would generally come back to the council and say, here are the sort of procedural matters, here are any sort of policy or significant issues that we'd be seeking support for, either informally or formally, depending on the scale of it. And so we would connect back with the council of the day to get endorsement for that submission. So yes.
So from what you've said, are you working on investigating that fast tracking? Are you working on that? Do we need a resolution to encourage you to do that?
At the moment, no, I don't think so. At the moment, it's, I guess, one stage back because the legislation hasn't been introduced to Parliament, and we've been having some, I guess, pre-engagement with MFE and officials around that legislation and what they're proposing and what perhaps additional could be helpful. So we're just working through that, and once the legislation is introduced and moves through that select committee process, which we anticipate to be probably sometime in March, then we'll be putting a submission together. It'll be broader than just Tauranga West, and we'll be engaging back with you on the content of that submission.
Second one then is the stormwater consent, running that contiguous. That's happening, or do we need a resolution to do
so
that?
That's already happening, and we're anticipating that we'll be lodging that, around about the same time that we're notifying the plan change, within, a few weeks, kind of either way. Yes.
And the other's the earthworks, but that's really up to the developers.
Yeah, so I think as Alistair mentioned, Kaingaroa have already lodged their earthworks consenting, and that's both through TCC and through the regional council. And the other developers are working through, I guess, the early stages of putting a consent together, and we're sort of helping them and suggesting that would be helpful to the whole project if they were to move that forward. Particularly in light of the issues that Richard mentioned earlier about some of the challenges that still exist through that process.
So be happy with that? Yep, Stephen.
Totally support the comments and the feedback from staff. I mean, in essence, what we're seeking to do here is to deliver more houses sooner. And at the moment, we're constrained to 2,400 unless we have the wider transport improvements accelerated. So we should be doing everything we possibly can to accelerate the wider transport improvements. And actually the prize may be bigger. And that's why I asked the question around potential density with Kaingaroa. And my question is, if we were to achieve the key provisions that were on the slide that you showed us, which is 3-story dwellings and various requirements around spacing and visual outlook and all of those sorts of things to create a reasonable urban amenity. But if we were to meet all of those criteria, what is and we didn't have a transport limitation, what is the potential number of homes that might be possible in that area? Are we still capped at 4,000 or could we do more?
So I actually drafted the development capacity assessment as part of the section 32. So that steps through a range of, I guess, considerations around that. But if you look at it from a pure plan enabled zoning perspective, the medium density residential zone enables densities of sort of like 75 dwellings per hectare if everything was developed at 3 stories and was attached. Now that's not going to happen, but that would deliver, I can't remember, it was close to 10,000 homes. But I think, if you step back from that and look at infrastructure, there are still some limitations around infrastructure, particularly water and wastewater servicing, obviously transport, but that could be resolved longer term. Those waters constraints are more around the 4,000 homes that would be enabled. There's obviously ways to, to look at augmenting supplies in future if higher densities were achieved, but it would require additional investment to what has been identified at the moment. So around 4,000 homes is around 30 dwellings per hectare, roughly. And that's on average. And I think, as Alistair mentioned, parts of Te Rauka West are a little bit more challenging to develop. They're not flat. They've got geotechnical issues, all that sort of thing. So if you have lower densities in some locations, say at 20, you have to achieve 35 or 40 in other locations to average out to 30. So that would be the high end that we're aspiring to at the moment.
That then raises the other hurdle. So consenting is a major hurdle, and we can do everything we possibly can to address to speed up the consenting process. But the other hurdle is both council's ability to fund the water infrastructure necessary to support more homes sooner, and central government's capability to fund the necessary investment in transport to enable the investment to occur. So funding is still probably the principal hurdle in the end that we have to address, because I suspect we can find pathways through to the consenting question. And so I think it once again reinforces the really important discussions that we have with central government around the need to give Tauranga City Council, in fact all councils, more ability and more tools to fund the required investment sooner. And it's great that we've heard the government talk about things like value capture. That's clearly part of it, because obviously if more of the homes could contribute more to the infrastructure necessary to enable the homes, then we could get things done faster. But also alternative funding mechanisms, including road pricing and other techniques, because if we don't, then we can't invest in the transport. And if we can't invest in the transport, we don't get more homes sooner. That's the story. And I think there's a really strong responsibility of the council to continue its advocacy with central government on those very issues, because although the government is setting targets for us to meet in terms of zoning land, zoned land's not much good unless you've got the infrastructure, as this case study clearly shows, to be able to deliver homes. And that means that we have to address both consenting and funding issues. So in addition to the submitting to the Plan Change 33 and doing everything we can to identify how we can speed things up, I think it's a critical role we play with central government and our community to understand that actually if we want to deliver homes, then we have to deliver transport, and that means that we have to find alternative funding and financing methods. I'm going to make that point consistently because I think it's really, really important that the entire community understands actually what's holding us back is the need to be bolder on some of these key issues.
It's also related to rates because we just cannot, rates can't fund it and petrol tax can't fund it. So we've got to find alternatives. Yeah. Okay, Bill.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to touch on the discussion around triggers and thresholds and vis-a-vis discretionary activity to go beyond the 2,400. So it's not so much for today, but it's in terms of when you guys come back around the submission, be really interested in the ability to have those triggers or thresholds contained in the variation and subsequent plan change, vis-a-vis the need to then go through a discretionary activity process. So where I'm heading, because discretionary activity process, another whole process for applicants to go through. But if there were some of those triggers and thresholds embedded in the variation, that if those triggers or thresholds are met, such as commitment to Highway 29 and the funding sign-off, then certain things can happen. So the concern I have around discretionary activity, there's still a whole lot of uncertainty and a whole subsequent planning process that has to be gone through. So just be interested, not for now, but when you come back around that whole submission and those matters and how we could look at those. Together with any other, and it's something the Commission will think about in terms of any other advocacy that we might need to do with government. I've got 2 or 3 matters that I would like, Chair, to catch up with staff at a later date, not about the detail of the plan change, but they are really around the engagement of governance during the plan change preparation process and those types of things post our departure. So I've just got some thinking in that space, just aside from my private plan change mantra, but just how that has gone about and how governance engaged and what you seek from governance, because it'll be quite different to the 4 of us around that table. And also picking up as part of that discussion, the consideration of matters, because when you look at the green spaces, they are quite extensive. At the end of the day, someone will need to pay to maintain them and all of that. So I'd like to actually pick up some of that discussion at that point. And also my third point in terms of that discussion is if I use the commercial centre as an example, ensuring that we look at not just a particular growth area, such as subject to a plan change, but looking at the wider areas that actually may be influenced or may influence commercial areas. And that is then tied back to our approval, was it end of last year, in terms of a commercial hierarchy and all of that. So there's a few issues there I think it would be more productive of a discussion outside of this forum to begin with, Chair.
Thanks, Anne. I just wanted to say, and I was pretty impressed by your planning knowledge, I think, framing all of that up and giving, direction to our staff about, I'm pretty impressed for a non-planner. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to reflect on, Bill and I, with our previous roles with Smart Growth, and 8 years has taken to get to this point of notification. So, and there's a lot of work that's gone in behind the scenes. The partnership approach with the landowners, with Wakakotahi, with the hapu as well. And I'm aware of, that when it came to the hapu, their primary concerns was around, or are around, the impact on the river corridor, and taking into account the Wairau River strategy. So taking that approach, working together and resolving these issues, and it hasn't been an easy process to work through. When you've got competing drivers, competing interests, and then we've got kind of the national overlay on top of that. I suppose one thing I'm kind of reflecting on, this would be a great case study of how complex, how time consuming these processes can be. And thinking about this new government, they've got a reform program they're about to initiate as well in terms of RM. It'd be useful, I think, or would be helpful, I think, to kind of look at what we've done here. If we're talking about unlocking land, working collaboratively across agencies, and then also the funding to be able to deliver housing on the ground for 4,000 homes. So the return, from an effort perspective, from my perspective, is pretty low. If we're delivering 10,000 homes, that would be great. But 4,000 for the amount of effort that's gone into this, understanding we do have major constraints around our city with developable land. But I think it would be a great case study to look at and reflect on and provide some advice to an incoming, this government in particular, around an incoming reform program. Thank you.
Bill's moving the recommendations, Shad seconding them. So that is to receive the report, adopt the proposed variation for public notification, and authorise the General Manager of Strategy, Growth and Governance to arrange the public notification process and delegate that same General Manager to approve any minor and technical changes to the proposed text in the public notification. And then we will continue the discussions that we've started here today on some of those other alternatives. So this is a big first step, I guess, for the staff who've been working on this for 8 years. It is a momentous day to get this done and out there, and of course for the developers, it's the start of the real journey on getting this 4,000 houses delivered. But I agree with Shad, when you add that all up, it's not a great result. It'd be interesting to see what the cost per house is to this stage, to get to this stage. Okay, all of which goes under the radar, of course, and no one quite understands. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion then. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks very much. Thanks to our partners in this process. Okay, that brings us to item 11.2, the transfer of Te Paho Reserve. Alicia and Simon, yes, coming up.
Morena koutou, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Te Paho was classified as a strategic disposal late last year. public consultation was carried out with submissions closing 19 January. Responses were overwhelmingly in support of the proposed disposal.
Good.
We've recommended that Te Pāhau now be transferred to Ngāi Settlement Trust at a consideration of $1, subject to some easements in favour of council. So there's a water main and some stormwater ponds in there. The low purchase price reflects the environmental, cultural and historic benefits that the transfer will deliver.
Thanks, Simon. The only thing, look, first of all, thank everyone who submitted on it. It's pretty good result, actually, quite impressive. And some people have done some hard work, but it's really good to see that all the submissions were in favour. And it just makes absolute sense from the Commission's point of view. The only query I have is around the other key terms in the sale and purchase agreement, and I think we did discuss that it would. I mean, we understand it's going to be used for environmental purposes. The intention is to restore wetlands and have it as a green space and provide better access to the urupa. But in those key terms, I'm assuming that we would be looking to make sure that it's not used for any dwelling purposes or any major construction to take place on it.
Absolutely. So there'll be no ability to erect substantial improvements on their dwellings, housing. We would need to do that. Good point.
So I mean, certainly if there's work being done, planting work being done, you sheds and things to store tools and that sort of thing, but no residential or construction.
Yep. So we would have to have some restrictive covenants about that as well.
But otherwise, it's just a straight. Why do we have to charge $1? That's the other question.
It's a legal point. So for offer and acceptance, you need consideration.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah. So the consideration is $1.
Contract's 101.
Yeah, contract's 101.
Yeah. Contract law 101. Yeah.
I still remember it 30 years ago.
Okay. Any questions? Shared.
Thanks, Simon. I don't really have a question, just kind of some comments, I suppose. I think for Ngāi in particular, but also the other surrounding hapu, this has kind of been in and around this area, been an area of contention, I think, for the Maungatapu community, Haere community for a long time. Infrastructure, development, transport in particular, but also reflecting on the history of Maungatapu and subdivision and the impacts of urban growth on them. Has been significant, and it kind of came through in their submissions as well about the importance of this place, the urupa, the connection down to the Kautamako stream, and the relationship that they have to this place is of significant importance to them. So it makes sense, I think, in terms of the transfer of this piece of land. I worked on the Maungatapu underpass, the previous iteration to where we are today with 15th Ave and Turret. And I recall some of the discussions with the hapu back then, engaging with council about the potential transfer of this property back to them. And I understand this goes back even to the early 2000s. So this isn't a new issue for council. And isn't a new issue for the hapu. But recognising and restoring, I think, the integrity of this place back to them is actually. I just want to mihi to the whānau that have turned up today to witness this important decision. But also some of those that couldn't be here today. I mean, we do have whānau here and some that couldn't be here present. Yeah, but also those that, thinking about hui kākahu, and others like him. So with that, I'm happy to move the resolution.
Happy to second, Chair, and I just, in doing so, just make a comment. I don't know if we've ever had a proposal that's gone out for consultation where we've had all of the submissions have been in favour and none against. So just noting that on the way past. But
Pretty popular. Okay, so moved by Shad and seconded by Bill. So that is to receive the report, to receive the submissions, and agree to receive Buddy's late submission. It's becoming a regular occurrence, Buddy.
Buddy's
Approve the reconnection of the land known as Te Pāhua Reserve by way of transfer to Ngātaeahi, is that how you pronounce it? Ngātaeahi? Settlement Trust, and then delegate authority of the Chief Executive to negotiate and approve the terms and conditions of that agreement. And as Shad said, it's a significant decision for not only those that are here with us today, but we know the significance to some who have passed, particularly hui kākahu, but some others as well. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried.
Thank you. I should acknowledge the hard work that Chrissy Tarrant and Alicia put into this as well, and other council staff. It's been a big effort.
Okay. Links Ave, transitional arrangements.
We've got Karen here to talk about that. Just by way of introduction, we've obviously had some significant safety concerns around the operation of Links Ave since I think it was late 2018, early 2019. We had about mid 2019, we had the first community representation in chambers about the unsafe environment, particularly for children. We threw everything but or even the kitchen sink at it to try and implement some changes, some of which didn't land all that well with some of the stakeholders. We are trying to fit multitude of objectives into this narrow corridor, and ultimately a community liaison or advisory group was established in mid-22, and this paper concludes the work that we've done with them and the implementation aspects that we have landed on in terms of the physical operation of the corridor. So I'll hand over to Karen with that introduction.
Thank you, Nick. And on that note, I would formally like to acknowledge the Links Ave panel. They have tested us, challenged us, and worked with us to achieve some great outcomes really passionately for the Links Avenue themselves and the wider community. This, as Nick indicated, is the last phase for implementation of transitional improvements. So it's noting that a business case needs to be wrapped around it for some future and permanent change. We couldn't, unfortunately, deliver all the aspirations as we would have liked. The impacts on the community at this, for example, removing all the parking on Links Ave is not appropriate at this time. So that said, this is the last phase that includes improvements outside of the school, enhancing the safety of the current cycle facilities, following feedback from local students and some of the challenges they face. And importantly, the next step is to reevaluate the operation of the cul-de-sac following the opening of B2B. So that opened in December. We've needed to wait for traffic to normalise, so we'll be doing that assessment as we speak through to March, and also look at new opportunities, which will be quite unique for Tauranga at looking at potential exemptions for residents, where some have some real challenges in accessing local amenities, going to the doctor, having their friends visit. So we hear that loud and clear. So we'll be looking at what options might exist within very constrained legal framework that we work within. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Karen. And can we also, first of all, acknowledge the panel and the work that the panel have done? And we really appreciate it because it hasn't been easy for them. And they're just ordinary residents who care about their community, and they've had to grapple with NZTA rules, safety rules, outside people, and the systems and processes of local government. So we really appreciate the work that they've done. But I think we also need to acknowledge you, because I think you came and brought into that process a real willingness to work alongside the community. And we had many comments from them that your can-do attitude made a big difference to them. And they felt that you were listening to them and trying to do the best for them in a very difficult circumstance. So thank you for that work. And I think, so thanks, thank you and to the panel. I have a question around the B2B, and it was part of the frustration of trying to drive into the city last night, because B2B still hasn't finished. And I was routed all over the city to try and get from the east to Matua last night. So big sections closed. The roundabout there at Bayfair was closed. We were rerouted down, very tempted to go down Lynx Ave. But so I'm just a bit worried that we are testing that normalisation maybe a bit too soon. Because we're not there yet, and this is the second Sunday night in a row where traffic has been disrupted quite considerably. Had to go through Papamoa and out the back there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. I wasn't aware. So we'll definitely look at extending some of those evaluations to ensure we capture it today and a bit further along the line. But thank you.
I think it's worth just mentioning the course of this, which the paper doesn't actually talk about, was triggered by the rerouting of the traffic.
I was coming to that.
From the B2B project, and I think it started in 2018 and then quickly ramped up and nearly within a number of months doubled the volume on Lynx Ave, and that's what generated the safety issues, particularly for school children on the footpaths, etc., where they had buses really close to them, and that was the primary concern of the parents at the time in the area. And then there's obviously been delay after delay in completing the project, and I guess we're in that position of another one here where we had understood that it was going to be back to normal and the State Highway traffic would return to State Highway 2. And you're right, that hasn't happened yet. So it's something we're keeping an eye on. And of course, we can't make the final decision on it until we see that normalisation.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. But actually, I mean, and you're right. And I was going to raise, where we started, where we picked it up, but actually it goes back further than that. And that's, I think for the council, we need to be very careful. And I think that's some of the concerns through the TSP, that governance needs to be over the top of some of that planning, because at some stage, Lynx Ave was determined as the bus route and the cycle route, and 200 buses a day go through that street. That's a residential street. And, it beggars belief for me that that would have been part of the planning without talking to the community, without thinking, because then the bus lane goes in and then we develop the safety. So right back at the stage when you're planning the routes, to think that you're going to send at the moment 200 buses if public transport over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years increases, how many buses will be going down a residential street with a school and children going to and from not only that school, but the school, 2 other schools in close proximity. So it's even an earlier look and think about where those routes are. And that was the biggest complaint from the residents that we heard constantly, was that the buses used to go down the state highway. That's where they should be, in that sort of numbers. Because then we had they've still got the layover in Lysander Street, which is another residential street that has something like 50 buses idling at any, through the day outside residential homes. So if you go right back to the planning of this, it is appalling, actually. And did governance have a look at it? Did the council and the regional councillors look at the effects of that on people when that was planned? The answer's probably no.
Well, I think this goes back to a public transport blueprint process that was undertaken by the regional council in conjunction with our staff in Wakatahi back in 2016 or 17. I think governance probably was disconnected to that, although at some stage they did receive, endorse and support the blueprint, not necessarily understanding, I think, the full ramifications of the impact on the community. And of course, you know what happened thereafter, trying to establish bus terminals and Farm Street and that. So I think the disconnect or the understanding of the ramifications of those types of decisions probably weren't fully understood or appreciated by the council of the day. And since the other issue is that the state highway, Monganui Road there, where the B2B, it was determined that wasn't suitable for a major bus terminal and or site, but in hindsight, arguably as part of designs, it could well have been considered.
So I mean, I had to make that point because that's what we've heard from residents. Farm Street and Links Ave have severely changed what happens in residential streets. Okay. Shad.
Thanks, Karen, for the report, and support the comments, particularly to the panel. Giving up their time to engage with us and on behalf of the community to work through these issues, challenging issues. Just looking at these transitional changes that have been proposed, and understand that we went out and we engaged with the community, particularly those that live in around Links Ave, 700 initiations for contact, and then we got about 17 responses or something to that effect. I suppose I'm just wanting some clarity or some reassurance that, as we initiate these transitional changes, that we continue the conversation. I know that we can, through the transitional process, we can adjust things as we go to accommodate people's issues and concerns. But just wanting to make sure that we've got clear line of sight in terms of our engagement with community through that process.
Absolutely. Part of the transitional change is to test and what that looks like and receive further feedback from the community. And I think it's really important prior to a full business case process and how that gets funded into the future, given government priorities, that we really look to harness some of those low-cost interventions and support some of the challenges for that community that they face. So while the panel has retired, we still keep in contact with them, keep them updated, and plan to do the same with the residents and the wider community.
Thank you. I totally agree with the sentiments. My question's about you've done a good job, I think, in minimising the number of in-lane bus stops, but there's one out of the 9 that you've managed to. What, if anything, can be done about that?
Through you, the Chair, Commissioners, it is an incredibly challenging situation to address. It's on the Gulf Road intersection, so we've moved it further down where further width is allowed for vehicles to pass. But a lot of the students, because the footpath is so congested, is coming around from Gulf Road off the footpath and going into the live traffic lane. The buses don't see them. It is a really challenging bit of road. So to address that, we're bringing the cycle lane on the inside of the lane and the bus stop, but also move the bus lane a little bit further down. So when it's safe to pass, there's better sufficient space for vehicles to do that. It's not ideal. We can't give them absolute traffic lane, but it is the best we can do, unfortunately, within the constraints.
But I guess that's one of the issues that can be tested as how the transition is put in place.
Anything else? No. Bill's happy to move. We just received the report and endorse the improvements phase 3 for implementation. You happy to second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks, Karen. Okay, so as I advised, we are now going to go into public excluded. So someone like to move that we do that for the reasons outlined in the agenda? Stephen moved and Shad seconded. All those in favour